So, good evening, all of you. Welcome to this web talk. I am our speaker has already joined us. Today, the speaker is Satya Narayan Sahu. I am thankful to him for his agreement to my informal invitation, and I know that he understands the academics. He understands, reading and writing, teaching, learning. No formality is required to be engaged with such kind of events. As the convener, it's my responsibility to introduce the speaker and they introduce the topic. Let me do so. Sri Satyanarayan Sahu, today's speaker, he thinks himself as a student of collected works of Mahatma Gandhi. He is the student of writings of Jawaharlal Nehru, B.R. Ambedkar, Swami Vivekanand, Utkalmani Gopabandhu Das, then Madhusudan Das. He had served late Sri K.R. Narayanan, the President of India, as the officer on special duty and press secretary. He had a tenure as the director in the Prime Minister's office and as joint secretary in Rajya Sabha Secretariat. He has delivered numerous lectures in several prestigious educational institutions such as various central universities, state universities, Indian Institute of Management, National Institute of Technology, and National Law Schools. He has authored numerous articles on Mahatma Gandhi, and some of his recent articles are Mahatma Gandhi on air pollution and clean air, when K.R. Narayan interviewed Mahatma Gandhi on the line of Mahatma Gandhi's model temple and Navin Patnaik's efforts to turn Puri Jagannath temple to a World Heritage Site, global significance of Champaran Satyagraha, Gandhi, sustainable development and environment. These are some of the writings on Gandhi recently by the speaker. From this writing, one can understand why the speaker thinks himself he is the student of collected works of Mahatma Gandhi. He was also invited to deliver lectures abroad, such as Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago, George Washington University, Washington, and Osaka University. Many of his articles have been translated to Hindi, Marathi, and Tamil language. This is the popularity of him as a Gandhian scholar. Currently, the speaker is working as a guest faculty in several universities in Delhi, including National Law University, Delhi. Today, the speaker will speak on researching Gandhi. Now, researching Gandhi means not only unearthing his ideas, but also deeply understanding his actions, which are extremely important to explain his worldview, which became influential in shaping the minds across the world. A reading of history and understanding of mythology with greater sensitivity to integrate spiritual insights with modern ideas is essential to engage oneself in doing research on Gandhi. It is instructive to note that Gandhi himself was asked to read the history of India to become a successful lawyer. Later, his deep reading of the history of India made him an outstanding non-violent warrior, setting an example for the rest of the world to follow. Therefore, researching Gandhi means familiarizing with history, dwelling deep into the writings of Gandhi by reading his original writings contained in almost 100 volumes of his collected works is a sure step for doing research on Gandhi. Locating ideas of the collected works in the context of contemporary issues is critical in making research on Gandhi topical. Therefore, a nuanced understanding of contemporary developments and linking them with thoughts articulated by Gandhi during freedom struggle is essential to make research on Gandhi more pertinent and meaningful. It means a holistic approach and understanding is a categorical imperative for researching Gandhi. This is the abstract Sri Satyanarayana Sahu, the Gandhian scholar, has sent to me. I just read it out. It's not so difficult to understand, but these sentences are not very simple sentences. But when the idea is complex, one cannot write simple sentence to articulate that complex idea. One thing we understand that how Gandhi is relevant today in this neoliberal system, in this neoliberal society. Researching Gandhi will open up the possibility of defeating the ills and evils of neoliberal system or society. Maybe Gandhi is the only solution to our contemporary problems. And personally, I do understand the relevance of this topic, researching Gandhi. Researching Gandhi will provide us insights. It will provide insights to all researchers to understand, to develop a perspective, and maybe it will save humanity from this ongoing danger. With this little introduction, I welcome once again to a Gandhian scholar like Satyanarayana Sahu to start his deliberation on this topic. And at the same time, let me also make it clear that today I have requested Professor Syama Prasad Guru. Perhaps Satya sir knows him well. Satya sir, 2 years ago, our department invited Satya sir to address the valedictory session on a seminar on New India, where Professor Guru was also present. Today, Professor Guru, since he is also interested in Gandhi, I have requested him to be the discutant of this talk so that the students and participants will get an opportunity to be familiar with dialogues on Gandhi. There will be no doubt there will be dialogue between Professor Guru and Sri Satya Sahu on this topic, and it will be a kind of gift for all of us to develop a perspective. So with this, I invite Satyanarayana Sahu to start his deliberation. Sir, welcome and kindly start your deliberation.
Uh, Thank you so much for your kind words. Uh, you know, Mr. Guru and other faculty members of Sambalpur, Gangadhar Meher University. Or am I telling the wrong name?
It's Sambalpur. It's Sambalpur University, sir.
Sorry, Sambalpur University. I'm so sorry. Sambalpur University.
And another faculty has joined with us, Professor Swarnomai Tripathi from Utkal University.
Yeah, she's my friend. She's my classmate. We studied together in JNU, and we did our post-graduation, together. So thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. My friend Swarna is there, of course, and many other faculty members of the great Sambalpur University are here. There in the online, they've joined. This is my dear the students of Sambalpur University. So the topic chosen for today's discussion, is quite fascinating because world over Gandhi is being studied, being researched, being understood in the contemporary context, and his ideas are being dissected. His more than his ideas, his actions are being seen with a lot of appreciation and, of course, with a lot of amazement, because people, obviously cannot believe that such a man who could act on the basis of truth and nonviolence and lay down his life in defense of truth and nonviolence, could do so in the modern period of world history and in face of the might of the British Empire, which actually took away the freedom of India and subjected people of India to untold exploitation and suffering. So, in the context of the world confronting the challenges of multiple challenges of environmental degradation, global warming, climate change, and the illiberal democracies which have emerged of late, I think we need to understand Gandhi in a better way. And to understand Gandhi, we need to do research on his ideas, and more than his ideas, his actions. Because Gandhi was not just sitting in a library and writing extensively and giving a theory and conceptualizing, and then providing a lot of resources, academic resources. He was, in fact, an activist who acted, who mobilized people, and then provided leadership to them to fight against a system, fight against the system of British Empire, which he called satanic. And then his while British Empire was based on possession and non-violence, because the possessive instinct which emerged during 16th century Europe, and for that for the protection of that possessive instinct, an architecture of governance was provided by eminent theorists and thinkers, and particularly the contractual thinkers like Thomas Hobbes. So they celebrated a system of governance where the sovereign authority would be, at the apex level, and that sovereign authority would remain unchallenged, and that sovereign authority would provide an order, an architecture which would provide security, stability, and safety of life. Okay, uh, such a system of governance actually celebrated possessive individualism, and that possessive individualism led to possession of resources and energy of the peoples across the world. The colonialism, imperialism was a gory manifestation of that possessive instinct. So, and therefore this kind of architecture of governance which was provided during that time in Britain was to protect that possessive instinct by guaranteeing the rights and liberties and providing safety and security. So possession and violence remain central to the colonial architecture, expansion of colonialism, expansion of British Empire, or for that matter, the empires which emanated from the modern Europe. So Gandhi was responding to that possession and violence associated with colonialism, with non-violence and non-possession. So we need to understand this aspect of Gandhi, how he countered British Empire based on possession and violence with non-possession and non-violence. And from where did he derive that idea of non-violence and non-possession? So it is very fascinating to note that from Jainism, from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, Ashtanga Yoga, he derived non-violence and non-possession. So this aspect of Gandhi's life needs to be understood, and therefore the research is required. Researching Gandhi means to understand the sources from where he derived those ideas. He understood modern civilization, which emerged in Europe, centering around a system of production which believed in possessing the territories of others, possessing the energy resources of others, converting the territories of others to markets, and for that, employment of violence was a critical necessity. And Gandhi understood those processes of modern civilization. If one cares to have a glimpse of his book Hind Swaraj, he categorically stated that modern civilization was based on incessant application of wants and desires. And because of that incessant multiplication of wants and desires, possessive instinct was celebrated. Possession was considered central to the modern civilization. And Gandhi was countering that by saying that while Western civilization is based on incessant multiplication of wants and desires, the Eastern civilization is based on moderation, discipline, and contentment. Okay, so so this is kind of approach he adopted, and that approach was embodied in his book Hind Swaraj. So so when you try to understand Gandhi, we have to really understand these aspects. Why did he employ non-violence and non-possession? Because he thought that a the Western civilization based on possession, possessive individualism, and violence cannot be countered by the same principles, that is possession, possessive individualism, and violence. So he adopted a different method, and that different method came from you know Patanjali's yoga, Ashtanga yoga, where Satya, Ahimsa, Brahmacharya, uh, you know, Satya, Ahimsa, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, all those principles. And therefore he prepared, so therefore that's why I'm saying that we need to have an insight to understand the ancient insights embodied in non-possession, non-stealing, non-violence, you know, and so these are the dimensions which were embodied in Patanjali's yoga, embodied in Jainism, and uh, and then he employed them in the modern period, modern or to fight against the modern civilization, which was celebrating violence, which was celebrating possession, possessive instinct. So that is why when we engage in research on Gandhi, we have to combine, his understanding of modern civilization and his employment of ancient insights. This is very critical. When I was talking to some of the students in universities abroad, and when I explained to them these aspects, they were quite stunned to know that Gandhi employed the ancient insights to address the challenges posed by modern civilization rooted in violence and possessive individualism. There's a book by Macpherson. We were studying that book during our MA days. The name of the book is Possessive Individualism. So Macpherson argued that the architecture of governance which emerged in Europe and which were provided by the contractual theorists like Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, so he was saying that the central to those theorists were, the celebration of possessive individualism. Possess as much as possible, possess wealth, possess territories, and to possess so much of resources and to possess so much of territories, we require an architecture of governance which will ensure that there is freedom for us, there is security for us, there is safety for our life, there is right to life, and that right to life is protected by the state. So therefore, these attributes of modern civilization to protect life so that one can possess as much as possible. One can multiply wants and desires so that one could possess more. Gandhi said that remained the problem. That was the problem. And that problem gave birth to colonialism, imperialism, because possession of territories, possession of resources of others was considered essential for a production process which multiplied wants and desires. So then Gandhi thought such a process of production which believed in multiplication of wants and desires cannot be countered by the same method which it adopted. We need to counter it by our own traditional ancient insights celebrating non-violence and non-possession. I remember a group of filmmakers, they were shooting a film in Rajghat near the Samadhi of Mahatma Gandhi. And while shooting, they found that one, European gentleman from Europe. He went to the Samadhi and he paid floral tributes. He placed some flowers and then he was coming out. So he was asked a question by the film crew. First question was they wanted to know from which country he hailed, and then when he said he was from Britain, then the next question was, why did you come to Mahatma Gandhi's Samadhi to pay tribute to him? Because he fought against the Britain, and British Empire got liquidated because of Gandhi. And the gentleman from UK, he gave a very remarkable answer, an extraordinary answer. He said Britishers knew how to deal with violence. They didn't know how to deal with non-violence. And Gandhi outwitted Britishers by employing non-violence. So this finer understanding of Gandhi that non-violence can counter violence and eventually would become victorious without causing any ill will, but by creating a winsome feeling, both in the minds of the person who employs violence and in the minds of the person against whom the violence was employed. So this, adoption of non-violent approach is not a zero-sum game. It's an approach which would cause, it is winsome. It will be a win for the adversary. It is a win for the person who challenges the adversary. So this kind of approach, which is remarkable in the modern period. And Gandhi showed that path. And this path is now, the path shown by Gandhi is now celebrated, by employing a concept called restorative justice. This is not adversarial. It is a kind of an approach which would cause peace, which is called reconciliation, which would promote understanding and celebrate accommodation. So this is important. This kind of understanding of Gandhi through research which would enable us to explore his understanding of modern civilization and his nuanced understanding that such a civilization can be countered by employing non-violence and non-possession, which he derived from our ancient insights in ancient system of yoga. So this is very fascinating. And if you look at the books written by scholars on Gandhi, you won't find such finer understanding. I actually understood Gandhi in this manner after I heard a monk in Rishikesh, a sannyasi, somebody who has renounced the world, and then he is now known as Swami Nirliptananda in Divine Life Society in Rishikesh. Divine Life Society was established by Swami Sivananda. And Swami Nirliptananda, he's from Odisha. He was an IAS officer. He belonged to 1966 batch of IAS. And he never, after joining IAS, he never, led a worldly life. He was very austere and very disciplined. And in 1985, he left IAS to join the Divine Life Society as a monk, that monastic order. And on one occasion when I was there in Rishikesh in October, 1st October, and I went to him and I told him that I would be leaving early morning, 2nd October. He said, no, don't leave on early morning. You be there till 12 o'clock, because then he said the ashram celebrates Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary, Gandhi Jayanti. And then So I was quite fascinated that why a monastic order located in Rishikesh was celebrating Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary or Gandhi Jayanti. So and so then what they do in Rishikesh is that on 2nd October they invite Dalits, they take them to this sanctum sanctorum of the temple or the place of worship, and then they are treated to a good lunch, and they are also offered new clothes and some money, and then they are one of the senior monks delivers a lecture on Gandhi. So Swami Niliptananda, while explaining the significance of Gandhi Jayanti, he stated that it was Gandhi who is considered as who occupies, he said, he occupies, Gandhi occupies a position higher than all monks of India. Because he said Gandhi was a kind of a sannyasi who employed the principles of sannyas to public life, to the larger society, economy, polity, and so on and so forth. So, what are those principles of sannyas? According to Swami Niliptananda, the principles of sannyas, Satya, Ahimsa, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, Asteya, all these are the principles of sannyas. They are confined to the monastic order, to the sannyasis who are there in ashrams. But Gandhi not only followed that, he made them integral to his Ekadas Brat, 11 vows. He, Satya Ahimsa, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, Atreya. Then he added to these 5 principles of sannyas, Swadeshi, Sarvadharma Sambhava, Sparsha Bhavana, abolition of untouchability, Sarira Sram, physical labor, Aswada, control of palate. Then, the other one is, I'm forgetting the last one, 11 vows. The last one is, Sarvadharma Sambhava, yeah. I mean, it's a removal of fear, Sarvatra Bhayavarjana. So these are the 11 principles. Now, if you look at closely these principles, and he employed he formulated those 11 vows, and he urged people to follow them. And why did he urge people to follow them? He said, by following these 11 vows, we will rule ourselves, we will control our senses. Once we rule ourselves by controlling ourselves, we will attain self-rule. And that self-rule means freedom from pretend. So Gandhi, the researching Gandhi means to understand that he first gives primacy to, ruling ourselves. Let us first rule ourselves by disciplining senses. And by ruling ourselves, by disciplining ourselves, by disciplining senses, we will attain self-rule. Now, this is a beautiful thing. So therefore, an individual had to control his senses, and by controlling senses, he would rule he'd rule himself or herself, and then that will lead to self-rule. That will lead to independence of India. So this is an approach which he derived from the principles of sannyas. Okay. Now, this kind of understanding I never read in any book. And then when I read the original writings of Gandhi, which are contained in 98 volumes, I was educated. That the spiritual approach he prescribed, followed, and urged people to adopt them, for fighting against British rule, that is very significant. So, this approach of Gandhi, that, the principles of sannyas should be followed at a mass level. For the first time in the history of India, say, a spiritual leader appealed to people to follow the principles of sannyas at their levels, and he mobilized those people to fight against British rule without ill will against Britishers. So this is the win sum approach. This is not a zero sum approach. The zero sum approach is the adversarial approach. The opponent loses, and the fellow who fights the opponent wins. Okay, so this win sum approach, as opposed to the zero sum approach or zero sum game, is a defining aspect of Mahatma Gandhi, which is very little understood actually. So therefore, who were the example or exemplary, satyagrahis, exemplary warriors of nonviolence? Because Gandhi, while prescribing the values or ideals of non-possession and non-violence, he was invoking or some examples from history and mythology. Who were the examples to be followed to fight against British rule based on non-violence? So look at his research. To look at those examples, he said, because he devised the satyagraha method, and then he said, who are the satyagrahis to be followed? Were there satyagrahis in mythology or history who could be followed, who could be invoked as splendid examples? He did research. He said he did research to find out satyagrahis from mythology and history. And he said the first satyagrahi was found in Hindu mythology. And that first satyagrahi was none other than Bhakt Prahalad. Prahalad was persecuted by his own father. Prahalad was all the time reciting the name of Lord Hari. And his father was planning to kill him, planning to persecute him, and all the time urging him not to recite the name of Lord Hari. But Prahalad never allowed himself, Prahalad never submitted himself to the dictations of his father. He went on reciting the name of Lord Hari. And even in face of death. So while reciting the name of Lord Hari, Prahalad never prayed Hari to eliminate his father so that he would peacefully recite the name of Lord Hari. So Gandhi said, like Prahalad, we have to fight against British rule. The way Prahalad never allowed himself, to the dictations of his father, submitted himself to the dictations of the father, we won't submit ourselves to the dictation of the British rule. We will fight, but while fighting, we will have no ill will against Britishers as much as Prahalad had no ill will against his father. So this is a great insight which he derived from mythology, the example of Prahalad to fight against British rule based on non-violence. The second example of satyagraha which Gandhi found was in Greek history, that is Socrates. Okay, and all of us know how Socrates drank poison because he was championing the cause of truth, and eventually he lost his life. So third example of a satyagrahi, according to Gandhi, was from Christianity. It was Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ, was crucified. But while being crucified, he had no ill will against those who put him on the cross and killed him. So therefore he said, Jesus Christ was a remarkable example of a satyagrahi. And fourth satyagrahi, according to Gandhi, was from Islam, and he was Imam Hussain. See, unfairly, Islam is associated with the terrorism. Islam is associated with all kinds of negative connotations and prejudices. India now, Muslims are facing all kinds of persecutions. All of us know what is happening now. So, but Imam Hussain in Islamic tradition represented a different legacy of sacrifice, legacy of non-violence, legacy, rooted in martyrdom. So Gandhi said that, like Imam Hussein, we should fight against the British rule, and if necessary, we have to lay down our lives. So referring to Imam Hussein, he was saying that I learned from the legacy of Imam Hussein that one could see victory in face of defeat. Okay, so this is the fourth satyagrahi from Islam, and fifth satyagrahi, Gandhi said, is the only woman satyagrahi, and she was Mirabai. Mirabai, all of us hear Mira bhajans. Mirabai was persecuted by her husband, by her in-laws, because she, being a Rajput princess, became a disciple of a Dalit Rai Guru, Raidas in Rajasthan, and she was ostracized, she was thrown away from her palace, and she composed hymns on Lord Krishna, Girdhari, but in none of the hymns of Mirabai there is any trace of ill will against her own family members who persecuted her, who even poisoned her. So Gandhi was referring to such examples from mythology and history. Prahlad is an example from mythology, and Socrates, Jesus Christ, Imam Hussein, Mirabai, they are examples from history. And these examples have been taken from different religious traditions. So therefore, Gandhi did research to find out all those examples. And these are extraordinary and remarkable examples. And they offer such, lessons to the present day world, which is confronting polarizing narratives, divisive narratives. There is, retribution, there is revenge. There is some element of, call for blood, call for arms, call for genocide. So when such kind of atmosphere is prevailing in our country, in many parts of the world, there is a war going on, in Europe. So so these aspects of nonviolence, these aspects of winsome approach, which are relevant, deeply relevant for our own time. So therefore, the manner in which Gandhi could do research, unearth the examples of satyagraha from mythology and history, and then creatively employed to counter the challenges posed by modern civilization, they are absolutely fascinating. And then they offer, you know, f- I mean, enduring lessons to sustain this planet, to sustain our own individual lives, and to provide some kind of sanity and strength to the present day disturbed world, which is getting derailed because of poisonous narratives based on religious binaries and so on and so forth. So, having said so, Gandhi also was keen that was keen to bring together people based on based on based on commonalities of their religious understanding, commonalities of their cultural values, commonalities of their shared existence, and so on and so forth. So this is very important because today, when our identity is excessively defined by religion or by caste or by some narrow categories, we often get driven by those narrow categories. So Gandhi therefore said, we need to you know, have a balanced approach to integrate our diverse identities. See, all of us are Odias. All of us, speak, several languages. Some of us may be vegetarian. Some of us may be non-vegetarian. Some of us, I stay outside Odisha, so I have a different identity. Not only as an identity rooted in my Odia language, I have an identity because I stay outside Odisha. Somebody might have an identity based on religion, based on caste. We have multiple identities. But if you try to give priority to one identity over the other, that leads to distortion of identity. And therefore, you know, it opens up the possibilities of violence, narrowness, and sectarianism. So Gandhi understood this point. So therefore, he integrated different identities to provide a wholesome picture, a wholesome, or a balanced approach to understand an individual and a nation and the whole planet. See, for instance, he defined India not in terms of one religion. He said, I do not want India to be wholly Hindu, wholly Christian, wholly Islamic. I want India to be wholly tolerant with all its religions coexisting and flourishing. So this approach to balance identities, at the national level, and same thing he employed to balance identities, you know, of the individual as well. See, for instance, during the 1940s, when Jinnah was, adamant about the partition of India, Gandhi wanted to meet him. He, went to meet Jinnah 17 times. Jinnah never came to meet him. And on many occasions, Jinnah used to insist that he would meet Gandhi as a representative of Hindus of India. Then Gandhi said, how can I be representatives of Hindus alone? And then he said, I am a Gujarati and my identity rooted, because my Gujarati identity is coextensive with my Indian identity, and my Gujarati and Indian identity is coextensive with my Hindu identity. And all these identities, Gujarati, Indian and Hindu identities, they are coextensive with planetary identity. And identities rooted in Gujarati language, Indian identity, or Hindu identity and Indian identity, and planetary identity, they are all coextensive with my cosmic identity. So look at the approach. This is a remarkable approach which balances all identities. See, today, we are confronting violence, confronting exclusive politics based on exclusion, because some political parties are stressing on purely religious identity. Some political parties are, stressing on caste identities. Some political parties are mobilizing people based on linguistic identities. So they are distorting identities. So when the identities are distorted, that promotes narrowness, that breeds violence. Professor Amartya Sen in his book Identity and Violence, he clearly, spelt out that individuals have multiple identities. All those identities should be projected in a balanced manner. Otherwise, that would lead to distortion, narrowness, and violence. So, we therefore, this is what exactly Gandhi adopted. So, if you look at the manner in which he had a very finer understanding of the issues concerning identity, we are finding the same, explanations, same kind of interpretations in the writings of great scholars like Professor Amartya Sen, who wrote a book in 2005, Identity and Violence. And we find that there's a convergence of what Gandhi understood and what Amartya Sen is writing now. So this is the beauty of researching Gandhi, to contextualize his thoughts, contextualize thoughts by putting them in the in a framework which would help us to explain the contemporary crisis we are confronting in every part of the world. So that is the reason why often Gandhi is invoked. For instance, let me tell you the example of Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, wanted to meet Mahatma Gandhi, and when Gandhi was in London in 1935 to attend the Round Table Conference, Mahadev Desai, his secretary, told him, Charlie Chaplin wants to meet you. And Gandhi said, who are Charlie Chaplin? He said, "No, he's a great film actor." And then Gandhi met him. And they discussed about modern civilization, how, what kind of problems the modern civilization was causing. And by understanding those problems from Gandhi, Charlie Chaplin produced a film, directed a film. It's called Modern Times. So, how Charlie Chaplin, who is a product of, the world's metropolis of that time, London or England, he could understand the problems caused by modern civilization from Gandhi, and he produced a film. So this is the impact of Gandhi, across the world. So this is very fascinating. Gandhi, interrogated modern civilization, right from the first, beginning of first decade of 20th century. So this is a very interesting aspect of Gandhi's life and work, which assumes greater relevance for our own time. So similarly, let me just, you know, uh, take little more time to explain the other important key aspects of our present day world, which is passing through a crisis of catastrophic proportion, and that crisis is nothing but global warming, climate change, massive environmental degradation, and so on and so forth. And of course, we are now confronting a menace called air pollution. Now, if you do little research on Gandhi and understand his critique of modern civilization, one is really educated to understand that Gandhi wrote about air pollution right from 1906 onwards. Because, let me tell you one example of 1913. He was writing series of articles on health and publishing them in Indian Opinion when he was in a paper which he published from South Africa during, I think it was published started in 1903. So, Indian Opinion became, uh, the Indian Opinion became the mouthpiece of Indians during the first Satyagraha. So Gandhi said that in 1913, modern civilization would cause such problems that air would be polluted, and people living in cities and urban areas, they would run away to far off places to breathe clean air, and that would involve a cost. Now, what Gandhi wrote in 1913, we are now confronting. People, I know my friends living in Delhi, during November, December, when the air pollution becomes extremely, intense, they leave Delhi and go to hills. And then in 1918, while addressing the members of the municipality corporation of Ahmedabad, he defined Swaraj in terms of clean air, clean water, and plentiful grain. He said, if you Swaraj, he said Swaraj would mean clean air, clean water. Swaraj he defined in terms of many variables: Hindu-Muslim unity, women's empowerment, abolition of untouchability, economic equality. But also he defined Swaraj in terms of people's access to clean air and clean water. See, in Bhubaneswar today, while driving from Cuttack to Bhubaneswar, I found there are several, boards on the road saying that polluted air is a silent killer. So we are today seeing such kind of advertisements in a place like Odisha, which is relatively clean, and clean in terms of quality air at least. So 1918, while 1913, you are saying that in modern civilization people would pay a price to breathe clean air. In 1918, he defined Swaraj in terms of clean air and clean water. And so subsequently in 1930s, he said good governance would mean that both rulers and the subjects would have equal access to clean air and clean water. Now today, in several places in Delhi where I stay, people use air purifiers in offices, at homes. And somebody who cannot afford air purifiers is condemned to breathe polluted air. So this means if access to clean air was understood by Gandhi in terms of Swaraj, and if there is now no clean air but polluted air, this means in Delhi there is no Swaraj, or in Sambalpur or in Bhubaneswar and Kalahandi, if there is clean air, this means there is Swaraj in Sambalpur and Kalahandi. Okay, so these are the aspects of Gandhi. These are the remarkable dimensions of Gandhi, which you can understood by doing proper research. And therefore, we have to look at Gandhi in the context of the contemporary problems. And for that, we need to, go through his original writings. Okay, so this is a very fascinating dimension. You know, so the other aspect is that, let's say, gender equality, which is now considered as a key component of sustainable development. Now, Gandhi was, stressing about gender equality, or particularly equality of women at home, their equal access to the representative bodies, legislatures, etc., right from 1931 onwards. Okay, today we are talking about 33% reservation for women in legislatures, or 50% in local, you know, representative bodies. But 1947, even 1931, when he was there in London to attend Roundtable Conference, he was asked a question: do you think the future legislature of India would have more women in its fold? Gandhi said if the future legislature of India would not have more women, he would boycott it. 1947, he said, I want more women in legislatures than men. And even if his preference would lead to total displacement of men, he would not mind it. Now, so therefore, he was going beyond 33%. 33%. Now, these are the dimensions. So he wanted, legislatures to be more representative, by providing representation to, men, women in equal proportions. Now, these are the dimensions which we do not understand. We cannot understand without doing proper research to his worldview. And therefore, let me conclude by saying that, in the context of global warming and climate change, shall I finish? I'll finish in 2 minutes. I'll finish in
Okay,
two.
sir, no problem.
Yeah. So, there's a body called World Future Council established in Germany. They have come out with a book. They published a book called, you know, Surviving the Century, Facing Climate Chaos. It was published, I think, a few years back by World Future Council in Germany. In that book, I went through that book. There's no reference to Gandhi at all. But in the very first page, I think that the foreword, it is said that, the challenges of global warming, climate change can be faced, and we can survive the century and face the climate chaos, boldly and confidently by following four normative principles. Those four normative principles are nonviolence, sustainability, respect, and justice. In the whole book, there is no reference to Gandhi, but they say that these four normative principles, nonviolence, sustainability, respect, and justice, would save the planet from the apocalyptic disaster, of global warming and climate change. So these are the deeper dimensions of Gandhi, which have been understood, which have been appreciated, which are being deeply deeply analyzed by modern day experts on the issues concerning global warming and climate change. So this shows the level and extent to which we can unearth the ideas from the original writings of Gandhi. In fact, there is a UNDP report on human development. I think it was 2009 or 10. It's on global warming and climate change. It says that at the current rate of consumption of the and consumption of the resource and energy of the planet, humanity would require 6 planets for survival. And Gandhi exactly is saying the same thing. In 1927, he wrote a small piece called Industrialism, and he said that if India would follow the lifestyle of the Britishers and consume resources of the planet, the manner in which the Britishers used, then one planet would not be sufficient for India itself. And if that lifestyle of the Britishers were to be followed, Gandhi cautioned that the world would be converted to a desert. Now look at the understanding by the UNDP report and understanding of Gandhi in 1927, and those two, the understanding of Gandhi and UNDP, now they converge in 21st century. So therefore, this kind of research is required to, underline the contemporary significance of Gandhi and derive lessons to address the challenges that we confront. Thank you so much.
So thank you, sir, for your deliberation, and we got you know the essence of Gandhi, and researching Gandhi means knowing Gandhi, and you can know Gandhi by reading Gandhi. So knowing Gandhi means Gandhi's position on several issues. Now, when you are knowing Gandhi on several issues, then you are knowing about your own culture, tradition, and civilizational values. And this knowledge, I think, it is required to protect us from our, intimate enemy. This intimate enemy is nothing but this, Western modernity and the ills and evils of modernity. So whenever we are in crisis, the reading of Gandhi always give us a kind of solace. But you know many, they also doubt Gandhi. Their doubt is that what is, or is there any difference between the private life of Gandhi and public life of Gandhi? So no doubt publicly what Gandhi has preached, that is something relevant, significant. My question to the speaker, how to, or is there any difference between the private life of Gandhi and public life of Gandhi? If there is, then how to reconcile it? That's my question to the speaker. Now I welcome Professor Shyama Prasad Guru. He will speak his observation on this talk. Please, Guru sir, you can start.
Yes. I would like to thank profusely Sri Satyanarayan Sahu for accepting our invitation to deliver talk to our students. I'm sure our students as listeners of this web talk would have been immensely benefited because Sahu's deliberations, as I observe, are extremely lucid and thought-provoking. We are grateful to you, sir, for your kindness to accept our invitation and talk to our students. Himanshu told me, or he asked me, to be a discussant. But I'm not a discussant. The speaker is the discussant. Sri Sahu is the speaker on this occasion, and Sri Sahu is also the discussant of this topic. I'm just a listener, sitting in the audience, listening attentively to what he discussed on Gandhi. specifically relating to the topic. But what I find, the first part of the topic, to me it is inappropriate. The topic is researching Gandhi. How can we do research on Gandhi? Do we have the capability of doing research on Gandhi and his ideas? What we generally mean by the term research? To investigate into and to contribute something original, something new, or to interpret some ideas which are implicit in a thinker. But as I understand Gandhi, no research is needed to be undertaken. Because Gandhi's ideas are original in themselves. And there is no need for interpreting Gandhi's ideas. What at best we can do, we are to read Gandhi, understand what he says, and try to emulate and imitate, approximate his ideas in our life, in our activities. And in that way, we can do a service, a great service to that great man, specifically in the context of establishing justice in society. The primary objective of Gandhi is to establish justice. And for establishing justice, he has undertaken a very strenuous role in the context of India. And his concept, I call it justice because the aim of the totality of his thought is Sarvodaya, development of all, peace of all, tranquility in the society. That is his primary objective. So some scholars and some individuals interpret Gandhi as exclusively an activist. I do not agree. He is not exclusively an activist. He is essentially a philosopher. And he has experimented his philosophical ideas in the process of his life in undertaking activities. That is what he says in the book, My Experiment with Truth. The aim of Gandhi is to experiment with truth. And the truth he has identified philosophically on reading the religious texts of major religions of this world. He has read Veda, Upanishads, the Christian religious scriptures, Muslim religious scriptures, Jaina and Buddhist religious scriptures. So the religious scriptures of all religions, major religions, he has read thoroughly, deeply, acquainted himself, and he has found out the essence of all religions. And he has formed his philosophy on God, on universe, on man, and the society. With this philosophical foundation, he has started, and he has experimented all his philosophical ideas in reality, in undertaking his activities and roles in society, specifically in the context of India. He has led the people of India to freedom, political freedom from the British rule. He has led the people of India to undertake social reforms. And the basis is his philosophical ideas on God. And what is his philosophical idea on God? He believes in the oneness of God. God is one. God is Satchidananda. His consciousness is formless. So Gandhi was not an orthodox religious man, despite the fact that he is a staunch believer in religion, in God. He is a humanist, a secular humanist he is. Because he believes, what he says, I believe in the oneness of God, and therefore in the oneness of entire mankind. We find the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which reverberates in our Upanishads, in Gandhian mindset, and get manifested in these ideas. And on the basis of his philosophical ideas, he has formulated his basic assumptions on human nature, the concept of man, that man is essentially a moral being. He has derived such a concept from his understanding of all these religious texts. This is the essence, that man is essentially a divine being, the highest creation of God. And therefore, man as the highest creation of God is expected to reflect and manifest godly values and virtues. And what are godly values and virtues? Values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. This is the Satya that Gandhi identifies. My experiment with truth, meaning thereby, he experiments in the values of liberty, equality, and fraternity in reality, in human life, in society. And therefore, from this concept of human nature, he has identified the values of man, the essential values of divine values of man: Satya, Ahimsa, Asteya, Aparigraha, and Brahmacharya. The foundation is Brahmacharya. Unless you practice Brahmacharya, unless you believe in Brahmacharya, cultivate Brahmacharya, you cannot undertake activity in search of truth. You cannot attain truth. Truth is the goal which is to be attained through Ahimsa, through Aparigraha, through Asteya, and through Brahmacharya. And Brahmacharya doesn't mean merely abstinence from sexual indulgences. No, it is total control of our physical senses. Our physical senses relating to our eyes, ears, mouth, tongue, skin. All these physical senses are to be controlled by us so that we can be moral, we can be selfless in our thinking, in our activities. Then only we can practice the value of aparigraha and asteya. Then only we can practice the value of ahimsa, non-injury. Unless we find the presence of God in all our fellow human beings, we can never practice the value of ahimsa, non-injury, doing no harm in thought, words, and deeds to our fellow human beings. On one hand, we must not do any injury to our fellow human beings. At the same time, we must love our fellow human beings simultaneously. So love and ahimsa, love and non-violence, these are the two sides of the same coin. One is positive, the other one is negative. Therefore, what is required? We must believe in God, believe in the oneness of God, and see the presence of God in all our fellow human beings, in the entire creations, in the living and non-living elements of this entire universe. Then only we can practice the value of equality. And when there is liberty and equality, the consequence is fraternity, complete brotherhood. So all these values and virtues that pertain to the human being, which are prescribed by Gandhi, are the derivative from his study and reading or research of our religious text or religious texts of major religions of this world. So Gandhi was a researcher, but we cannot do research on Gandhi. What he says, his entire life, his concepts, his activities, his roles, all these are self-evident truth. He has experimented with them. He is convinced about the truth. What at best we can do, we have to approximate his ideas, his values, his prescriptions. If at all we intend to make the society free from the present day ills and evils, free from corruption and selfishness that beset the society today. Therefore, what at best we can do, we cannot do research on Gandhi, but we can socialize the people with whom we interact in Gandhian values. We can socialize them. We can undertake endeavors to make them moral, human. That is the necessity of the time. So the people of this society needs to be spiritualized not in the religious sense of the term, but in human sense of the term. They need to be spiritualized, they need to be socialized, they need to be humanized in Gandhian values. And then only this society would be free from the ills and evils that afflict today. So Gandhism is the only panacea, the only remedy, so that the best socio-political existence on this earth for the entire mankind be possible or feasible. With this, I again congratulate our speaker. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Guru Sir. Now I welcome Professor Swarnomay Tripathi to give her observation. Then I will go back to Satya Sir to respond to all these observations. Swarnomay Madam, you can give your observation. No, I think there may be some problem. Now I am coming back to Satya Sir. If you want to respond to this observation, sir, you may.
मते कौन कहते कि हिमांशु बाबू
Yes, I was asking to give your observation on the talk.
ନାଇଁ ମୁଁ କିଛି କହିବିନି ଆପଣ ସତ୍ୟ ବାବୁଙ୍କୁ କୁହନ୍ତୁ କହିବା ପାଇଁ
Okay. Now, Satya sir, you can continue.
No. Thank you so much. I, while agreeing largely with Mr. Professor Guru, I would say that some degree of research is required to explore the ideas of Gandhi, because many aspects are unknown, still to be brought to the public domain. So some level of research, some degree of research is required, and largely I agree with him. And the other point to which you asked about public and private life, Gandhi never had such compartmentalization as far as his own life is concerned. There was no secrecy in his life, and what he did at his personal life, that was also reflected in the public life. So, and he never kept anything secret, whatever he did. Very candidly he wrote. He very boldly wrote, and one may disagree with him on many aspects, but one must appreciate the fact that he really had the courage to admit what he did, and and what he has written clearly that there is nothing secret in his life. So therefore, this distinction in public life and private life, I think that's not. That distinction was not there, and he put everything in public domain. Whether one may agree, one may disagree. I certainly to disagree with many aspects of Gandhi's ideas and so on and so forth, but that's a different matter. So this one, I think there are two questions in the chat box which I was looking at. The question is that why was M.K. Gandhi not involved in the making of the Indian Constitution, and why Gandhi did not get Nobel Prize for Peace? Okay, these two questions. Certain ideas of Gandhi, they are reflected in some aspects of Indian Constitution. So, for instance, Panchayat Raj, etc., and even the adoption of the constitutional method for realizing the objectives of the Constitution. This means a non-violent approach, which closely corresponds to even Ambedkar's ideals of eschewing even violent methods. So therefore, in the Constitution of India, the manner in which India has been conjured up or defined, not in terms of religion, not in terms of one religion, not in terms of one language, but in terms of the plurality of its heritage, plurality of its society, all that. They are all expressed in Gandhi's writings and, of course, in many other writings of our leaders of the freedom struggle. So, in fact, there was an amendment moved by some members in the Constitutional Assembly when the preamble was being discussed. One member, I'm forgetting his name, he moved an amendment that there should be, name of Gandhi in the preamble, name of Gandhi and non-violence. And when the preamble was being discussed, Sucheta Kriplani, he requested the mover of the amendment to withdraw it, because Sucheta Kriplani argued that suppose we mention Gandhi's name and non-violence and all that in the preamble, and if a new regime comes after several years and then removes the name of Gandhi from the preamble, then that would be an insult to Gandhi, that would be an affront to Gandhi. He said so. He requested the mover of the amendment to withdraw it, and he gracefully withdrew it. So Gandhi's impact was there, in the minds, in the Constitutional Assembly. Abolition of untouchability, for instance. When untouchability was abolished, in the Constitution itself, and all, people, irrespective of their caste identity, were accorded equal treatment, equality. There was in the Constitutional Assembly, members shouted Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. So Gandhi's impact was there. But of course, yes, Gandhi had also outlined his vision of constitution 2 times. So those vision was very grand and very idealistic, but many of them have been incorporated and all that. So it's not that Gandhi's impact was not there. The other question concerning why he didn't get Nobel Prize for Peace. In fact, he was considered for Nobel Prize for Peace twice, in around 1923-24 or maybe 1927. And when he came to know that his name has been, forwarded or sent for, nominating him for Nobel Prize, he requested that it should be withdrawn. Much more worthy person should be nominated. And so that was in 1920s. Second time, Nobel Committee itself took up his name, and seriously, it was being considered in 1947. Then there, I think, out of 5 members, 3 members were agreeing to. So 5 out of 5 members of the Nobel Committee, 3 members had agreed that Gandhi should get Nobel Prize for Peace. And later on, the Nobel Committee released the classified documents regarding that decision. And it was stated that, there was a British gentleman in the committee, and he was, I think, influenced by Britain, the British regime, British government, that he should oppose. And why he opposed? He said Gandhi was a nationalist, and nationalism in Europe caused, was one of the big factors behind the Second World War and the devastation that it confronted. So therefore, Gandhi should not, because he was a nationalist, and nationalism itself caused such havoc in Europe. So therefore, Gandhi, being a nationalist, should be denied the Nobel Prize for Peace. And so therefore, when the British gentleman in the Nobel Committee, who was agreeing to accord, to confer Nobel Prize for Peace on Gandhi, he, at the last moment, he also, withdrew from those 3 members. And therefore, the minority 2 members who were in favor of Nobel Prize. Therefore, Gandhi didn't get. But my personal, feeling is that Gandhi is above any prize. He is above Nobel Prize. So therefore, there's no problem if he didn't get Nobel Prize or for any prize. He is above all prizes, and himself had requested that his name should be withdrawn in 1920s, for the Nobel Prize for Peace. Thank you. So I think we should now, with your permission, uh, you know,
Okay, thank you, sir. I mean, there is another important question, and that's in the mind of many of us, that whether Gandhi, sorry, whether yes, whether Gandhi is a feminist or not. I mean, he supported women representation, and you said that he even didn't mind if whole of the legislator will become
yeah,
women.
yeah, that's a good question. Uh, President K.R. Narayanan, in some of his speeches, he called Gandhi a feminist because the manner in which he was taking up the cause of women and the manner in which massive mobilization of women took place during freedom struggle under his leadership. I mean, millions of women participated because of the method of non-violence adopted by him. Had there been violence, probably women would have kept away, because violence would have entailed, recruitment of able-bodied men who would be trained to wield, sophisticated weapons or weapons of destruction or guns and so on and so forth. So normally women would have been kept away had there been such, use of weapons. So the fact that ordinary illiterate village women across the country came forward, participated, they actually surrendered their ornaments, gave money, they gave life, they suffered imprisonment and so on and so forth. So that shows that nonviolence was a remarkable, method which could enlist the participation of very, very ordinary women. And Gandhi himself said that if you would get the willing support of women, his experiment with nonviolence would be an instant success. He said this is an exact line from a message he issued to the Chinese women, in 1947. And the other point regarding, whether Gandhi was a feminist or not, in fact, he is on record saying that he finds himself more aligned to women than men. And many women, they considered Gandhi so close to them. I mean, several women, they used to share their personal details. I mean, personal details concerning a woman's life. The wife of Jayaprakash Narayan, and many ladies during freedom struggle, they used to write letters to Gandhi and frankly talking about problems of menstruation, which is a attribute of a woman's life, to them, and openly, very publicly. And Gandhi used to reply to them, and those replies were put in public domain. Now, just imagine Jayaprakash Narayan's wife Prabhadevi, writing about the pain that she suffered during menstruation. This is quite astounding, unheard of. So, therefore, Gandhi was saying that she was, finding that she is probably closer to women than men, and many women also wrote like that. Okay, so that is the reason why she was giving that kind of emphasis on women, their preeminent position in taking up the cause of nonviolence and social transformation and so on and so forth. I will give one example. In that message to the Chinese women, he wrote that you know uh, you know see, he said that if an ancestral treasure lying buried in a house is found, what a joy it would cause, what a celebration it would cause to the people who could trace it. Similarly, women's power is lying dormant. Once it is explored and used, it will generate mighty force of nonviolence. Then he wrote, if women of Asia would come together, they will keep the atom bomb like a mere ball. My experiment in nonviolence will be an instant success if I get the willing support of women. Now, these are the lines from Gandhiji's message to Chinese women, and it establishes clearly to what the extent to which he was relying on women, to take forward the cause of nonviolence. In 1925, he wrote that if women of India do not come forward and participate in public life, India cannot be salvaged. So these are the dimensions of Gandhi's writings on women. So there is a book called another book I will refer to. There is a book called Bal Pothi. It is a primer written for school children, and I have written an article on this. This is meant for school children. There are small chapters in Bal Pothi, and there is a small chapter called household work, and in that it is quite fascinating to note that he talked about he prescribed gender equality at home. So, for instance, in that small chapter on household work, there is an imaginary debate in a family between brother and sister and mother. Among brother, sister, and mother, brother wants to study and play. A sister wants to study and play by following brother, but brother says, "No, my dear sister, that's not your job. Look at mother, what mother is doing. Mother was cooking food, washing utensils, cleaning clothes, and so on and so forth. So sister should, she should follow the mother, and he being a boy should follow father and go out and study." But then they were fighting, and sister was adamant to follow her brother. And mother intervened. He said, "My son, you are wrong. House belongs to both men and women. Household work should be the joint responsibility of both men, women, boy and girl, brother and sister, and so on and so forth." And then he said, household work is education, mother said. And by doing household work, one develops the muscles, the brain, improve the eyesight, and so on and so forth. So then when Gandhi circulated that book among his associates, they told Gandhi that this book, celebrating the equality of men and women in the family, and urging them to do household work or sharing the household work, which cause a rebellion in the family and break up the family. Gandhi said, "I'm writing this book for the cause of a good society." Now, what Gandhi wrote in 1922, prescribing sharing of household work among men and women in the family, is now being prescribed by in the government school textbooks. In Spain, students, boys are being trained to do household work. In Japan, through electronic messages, it is taught to the children, both boys and girls, that they should share household work. And now it has become a reality across Japan. I was in Japan in 2008, and household work is divided among husband and wife, brother and sister, alternately. One day brother will cook, the other day sister will cook, the third day father will cook, the fourth day mother will cook. So this is how the household work is said, and gender equality is now beginning from, gender equality is now being stressed at the level of the domestic frontier. And this is what exactly now, there was an advertisement in FM Gold radio station of Delhi. There's one Mr. Bharadwaj, his friend comes to his house. He said, "Bharadwaj sahab, aapka beti kahan hai?" He said, "बेटी बाहर गया है, दफ्तर गई है और कुछ सामान भी लेके साथ आएंगे." "बेटा कहाँ है?" "बेटा रसोई घर में खाना बना रहा है." Then he says, "अरे ये क्या कर रखा है? बेटी बाहर गई है और बेटा किचन में खाना बना रहा है." Then he said, "No, मैं दोनों को समान अधिकार दे रहा हूँ." Okay, so these are the dimensions which are now being transmitted through radio advertisements, which Gandhi wrote in 1922. So these are extremely fascinating aspects of gender equality, underlined by Gandhi in the context of domestic sphere. So therefore, by all these accounts, one can say that yes, Gandhi did upheld the cause of feminism, and so and so. That's right. So
And
anyway,
so,
thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your handling all these questions. So when you speak on Gandhi, then Gandhi comes very clearly before us. The way you said, this private life and public life, the experiment with the truth with my life, and what is private for Gandhi, that is also public for the Gandhi. I think that's a very good reply, but I will think through it. I will think through the
Yeah, sure, sure.
critics of Gandhi. Now we are at the last part of this event. Now I want Monisha Das, the student of Department of Political Science, Berhampur University, to provide vote of thanks to our speaker. Yes, Monisha.
Yes, yes, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Sir, I am audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you, sir. A very good evening, all of you. I am Manisha Das. I am really feel very opportunity and thankful to Dr. Himanshu Sekhar sir who gives me an opportunity to deliver the vote of thanks to all the dignitaries. First of all, I thank our chief speaker, Dr. Satya Sahu sir, whose achievements and knowledge I can't express in the words that reflect in his speech of today. Also, really, he is a great Indian who studied many philosophers like Gandhi, Gopabandhu, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Vivekananda, and many more Indian philosophers, and gives us a very knowledge about us. It is really incredible to listen you, sir. Your research on Gandhi and Indian philosophers gives us huge amount of knowledge and vision to observe and analyze this world in a very different angle. I think the specialty of this webinar is that you are creating a bridge between Gandhiji and our real life. And I just realized the ideology of Gandhi has a lot of potential to solve our day-to-day life problem. From our speech, from your speech, I learned how to lead a genius and peaceful life. Not only use given remedies to our lives, but also how to tackle the problem of global today that faced by the all human beings. And the most of the specialty things is that reflect on your articles, Mahatma Gandhi on air pollution and clean air, and global significance of Champaran Satyagraha and Gandhi sustainable development and environment. Sir also given a lecture on Osaka University in 2008 on the theme of Mahatma Gandhi and vision in the context of effort to face challenges of global warming. Sir also translated many articles in various languages, and sir currently is a guest faculty in several universities in Delhi, including the National Law University of Delhi. Sir highlighted many things and many philosophies of Gandhi. First thing is truth and non-violence. That is the main weapon of Gandhiji, and he gave us freedom from the might and long-term rule of the British Empire through these weapons, through these two weapons. And he also borrowed this and find this from the Patanjali of Patanjali's yoga, and spread all over the India and fight against the colonialism of the Britishers. At that time, the positions was the central point of the human civilization. It was Mahatma Gandhi who wrote in his books Hind Swaraj, and how the Gandhi take the non-violence from the Patanjali Yoga and implemented it in the modern time. So why not we are implemented the Gandhiji to our contemporary world problem and solve our problems that we face today. Sir also researched deeply Gandhi that also reflect in his the Swami, the monk who is the monk in the Rishikesh, and Gandhi here he's also said that the Ashtanga philosophy and how we follow the 11 vows of the Gandhi, so on we can control ourselves and rule over ourselves. And sir also research about the in the traditional Indian philosophy and found the five satyagrahis. First one is the Prahlada, second Socrates, then Jesus Christ, Imam Hussein, and Mirabai. It implies us all the solution of our life is in our surrounding us. We are only research on it and resolve our problem. Gandhi also focused on the unity in diversity and how we balance our identity and tolerate ideas spread all over the world. What the problem today we face, that is the global warming or environment pollution. But at that time, Gandhi also said about that in his Swaraj in Water and Clean Air. And gender equality, that is the main challenge of the government of today, that government face to give equality in the gender. That also Gandhi reflected in 1940s of his writing. And he want to give a high place to women. And how world and sir also highlighted how world became free from the global issue through following four norms, that is non-violence, sustainable development, respect, and justice. And sir also explained about feminist perspectives of Gandhi, that is really amazing. And uh, we think we are know very much about the Gandhi and learn through this webinar. And now I want to thank respected Sama Guru sir, who gives us a huge of knowledge about the Gandhijim, to how we follow Gandhijim in our life and thought, not in the thought, but in our day-to-day action. And through liberty and equality, how we establish fraternity in the society, and how we research Gandhi. And he also highlights that Gandhi research all aspect of the individual, and now the times will come we read Gandhi and follow the Gandhiji in our day-to-day life. And now I thanks the organizer of this webinar, Dr. Himanshu Sekhar Mishra sir, who organized such type of webinar for enhancing our knowledge. Sir, really, you are an enthusiastic personality who live in the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam ideology. Sir, we are all know sir belongs to Sambalpur University, but if he want, then he organized this type of webinar only Sambalpur based. But he don't do that, because today's webinar is the great example of that. I'm from Berhampur University, and there are other students from many university. They are also participate in this webinar and enhance their knowledge to know about their day-to-day life and how to solve the problems of their life. Sir, this thing knows us how passionate are to spread the knowledge, the doorstep of everyone's mind. If it will be organized. Thank you so much, sir, providing many remedies to solve our daily life problem through the such type of webinar. And I thanks to all the dignitaries, professors who are present here and participate here. And I thank to all the participants who are participate here and take some valuable time of their life. And I am sure you are not waste your valuable time. You are really gaining much more knowledge from this webinar. Really thanks to all those who are putting most valuable question and topic oriented question on this webinar. And I am lucky to participate such type of knowledgeable webinar. Once again, thank you all and all of you. Thank you.
So thank you, Manisha. I asked you to provide vote of thanks, but in your vote of thanks, you summarized the today's talk. And I didn't stop you, because when the student is speaking, we must have patience to listen. So thank you, sir. Thank you for your deliberation. Thank you for spending time for all of us. Now, here is the end of today's event. So, sir, namaskar, sir. Sir, you are on. You have to unmute.